Hey, Neel, welcome.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah, great to have you here. So I said we'll start off. My team mentioned that you're a longtime listener of the Consulting Success podcast. I think since 2018 is what they said, and that it played a role in kind of giving you some maybe inspiration or um, different ways of thinking about things as you made a transition from executive to actually like taking the leap to becoming a business owner. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. I think I found you by searching consulting podcasts, and at the time, 2018, I was an executive at a local media tech company, and I've always been entrepreneurial. Even before that position, I was consulting. I was a freelancer, and I knew I was going to get back into the consulting field. So I needed some inspiration. I did a lot of online searching and I came across your podcast and I found it valuable because your guests they are very concise in their journeys, but also because there's like so many different journeys and so many different ways that people have pursued this path. So for me, I was like, okay, this is very encouraging, and yeah, I've been a listener and I really do enjoy your podcast.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And it's, I guess, finding full circle, right? Because here you are today. And we're going to get into your story of how you made that transition. Ultimately, today, you're running a business called Tropoly, where it's you and partners. So I want to talk about kind of that setup. But let's kind of go back to that time of you being an executive and the transition. Tell us a little bit more about how you made that transition when you decided to start the business initially as kind of as a consultant. How did you go about doing that? What did that look like? What kind of spur? Just kind of walk us through like the steps that you took to actually launch the business.
Sure. I'll take you a little bit further back. So before I joined that particular company, I was a freelancer and I was more into design, branding. I was doing some marketing coaching, some marketing consulting, and I came across this company. Actually, they came across me and, they asked me if I could rebrand one of their products. And when I met with the CEO, she basically offered me a job. And I was like, I don't know if I want to work for somebody. I'm doing pretty good on my own, but it was a small little startup. I think it's about 10 to 15 people. It was there was a tech team, an R&D team. It was in digital video. So I dove in and we went through a pretty amazing journey of hyper growth. And that was back in 2012. And I stayed with them up until we went public in 2020. And then I jumped out in 2021. And so during that time, you know, I allowed me to be entrepreneurial within an organization. I built a very robust marketing team. It was about 40 people. It spanned across digital, creative, customer experience. We worked very closely with the sales teams. And also during that time, we worked with some, big brand names. We had a Series A fundraising. We had some M&As, and we went public. So there was a lot of experience unpacked during that journey. But I always knew I didn't want to be a public company executive. It's just even during my tenure, I was building departments. I was handing them off to other executives. I was never attached to anything except to make the company successful. And so towards towards the end of my tenure, I started talking with the CEO. I gave her a heads up. I think I'm going to move on. What can I do to help? And after we went public during the pandemic, I spent about 2 or 3 months restructuring my departments, making sure we had the right processes in place, the right handover and the leaders, and then I jumped out.
Let me ask you a quick question here. Did you get to participate in the benefits or the upside of the company going public?
So I was given stock options. Um, Unfortunately, going public wasn't necessarily a good thing for the stock at that time. So, just to be transparent, a little bit, I got a little bit, but not what you thought you'd get when you first get those stock options.
There are consultants out there landing dream clients, charging premium fees, and building the kind of business and life that you want. And here's the thing, they're not smarter or more talented than you. They've just got the right strategy. If you're tired of guessing your way through the next steps, wondering if you should raise your fees, change your marketing strategy, or find better clients, it's time to stop spinning your wheels. At Consulting Success, we've helped thousands of consultants just like you cut through the noise, get crystal clear on their goals, and build businesses that thrive. And the best part, it all starts with the free Consulting Success growth session. This is your chance to get personalized guidance on how to break through your challenges and build the business you deserve. No fluff, no gimmicks, just real strategies that work. So why not you? Why not today? Go to consultingsuccess.com/grow and book your free session now. Let's take the guesswork out of growing your consulting business. Again, visit consultingsuccess.com/grow today. Yeah, no, and I appreciate you sharing that, Neel. And the reason I asked is because oftentimes consultants are in positions where, they are offered stock, right, or some form of equity in a business instead of receiving payment. And there's always a fine line, right? There can be significant upside in the right situations, but more often than not, you just kind of get, a piece of paper that isn't worth as much as you hope it to be. And I remember my early days in consulting and, working with this biofuel company, getting 500,000 shares in my mind. I was like, well, if this just goes to a couple dollars, like, that's $1 million. Wow. And it wasn't worth anything. So, all right. I appreciate you sharing that. So, okay. So you went through that journey, then you decided to launch your consulting business. Walk us through what was the first thing that you did or a series of steps that you took to actually, start getting clients, and what was the business in the early days? What did it actually look like?
So before I jumped out, actually years before I jumped out, I started networking. I started reactivating my network. I'm here in Vancouver, and I knew a lot of people in the business community. I started reaching out, and I gave myself a goal. I think this was 2018 or 2019. I can't remember the exact year, but is to meet one person per week for the entire year. So 52 people, and I beat that goal. But the reason I did that was I knew I was going to jump out at some point, so I needed to start building my network again. But also just getting into the habit of networking. I was so ingrained in the company. It was my life for a while, working 60, 80 hours a week. So then slowly I wanted to make sure my horizons were open. I was looking at what's out there, other industries, just talking to people. So then from that point, when I jumped out, I had my networking in place. I started meeting people. I started getting referrals. One of the people that was referring me a lot of business actually is now one of my partners. And he was in a position where he was coming across a lot of companies that were getting funded in the US, privately funded. And they needed somebody to come in and reposition the brand and scale up their marketing. And so that was my first stream of clients and leads that came in. And yeah, it was primarily around brand strategy, positioning, building out marketing programs.
So just to make sure that we're all kind of catching what you're saying here, you were very intentional in building your network before you even quote unquote kind of like needed the network. But those seeds that you planted, that's what helped you to get your first few clients when you went out on your own. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, very smart of you to do that. Totally. Yeah. No, I think that's exactly why I want to highlight that. It just, shows how savvy you were to think of that, because very often people wait until they've launched their business and then start thinking, okay, like now I have to try and build these relations and connect with people while, long story short, right? The sooner you start, the better with this kind of thing. So for those who are listening right now, who are still employed, thinking about launching your own business, start networking like Neel did. For those of you who already have a business, remember that what you do today is, or what you're seeing in your business today is not the result of what you did yesterday. It's the result of what you did, 30, 60, 90, 120 days ago or longer. So start planting those seeds today, and it will bear fruit for you going forward. Okay. So you launched that business. You're a solo consultant. Let's fast forward now in the story, because you've consolidated, with other partners under this kind of new brand called Tropoly. So just talk us through how did that come about? Why do you decide to merge or kind of join forces instead of just remaining or building your own business without other partners?
Yeah. So even when I jumped out and I was getting those early projects, I had another individual that worked closely with me and who was more on the creative side. So I did most of the strategic work and the positioning work, and he did a lot of the synthesizing of that. And we worked really well together. He's from my network. I've known him for already like a decade at that point. So, it's kind of came full circle with him. And so as we progressed, the other gentleman who was referring all the business, we decided to work closer together and we joined forces. And we launched Tropoly about 2 years ago. And the reason why is um, the types of first we want to make it official. It makes it easier to work with clients if you're unified behind a brand. Everything was under my name first, and I was subcontracting, but I wanted to show I had very competent partners and were able to take on larger scale projects. And so we did, and we joined forces. We started taking on projects, and just recently we repositioned again. And the reason for that is the way we're working now is far more integrated. We're ex executives, we've been entrepreneurs. And so now we feel like we can provide more value if we work closer with the founder or the CEO and steer the ship a little bit more integrated, more from within.
And when you say that you've repositioned again, what does that mean? Like kind of more tactically, or just paint that picture. Like what did you actually do? Is it a new logo? Is it a new tagline? Is it something completely different? Oftentimes people don't really understand what that looks like. So bring it into clarity for us.
Yeah, when we launched Tropoly originally, we called ourselves like a brand transformation firm. As working with organizations and repositioning them or rebranding them, getting them to market. What we realized is we'd work on a project and there was very little to do after the project was done. The clients positioned us in a box that they thought of us as only like kind of like a branding or a marketing firm, and then they'd move on. We took a hard look at ourselves as like we all have at least 20 years experience. We should be doing work that's a little bit more strategic, a little bit more involved, um, a little bit more grown up for us. We don't want to be an agency. And this is not to offend anybody that's running an agency. It's just we get more out of it if we're able to help the business actually scale. And so when we repositioned, yes, we did update the logo. We kept the name, we updated the logo, but we defined ourselves as a commercialization firm as opposed to a brand strategy firm. And the reason for that is because it allows us to connect the dots between getting a client to market, positioning them and scaling them. And this isn't just for startups, it's mostly for mid-cap companies who are looking to what we call change events. They're heading towards a fundraise or an M&A, launching a new product, going into a new market. And so we align ourselves with those initiatives now.
And so is the brand strategy that you were doing before still part of that commercialization? It's just now you've added on additional spokes to the wheel, if you will, or how do you describe that?
It's in there if it's needed, and we have those capabilities. And part of this repositioning, we've added a fourth partner who was in the same firm that I was in for the media tech firm that I was working part of.
Right. Let me ask you then a question on this, Neel. When, I mean, it sounds from an outsider's view that you have created or developed a more comprehensive offering, right? It's the commercialization. It's not just the brand strategy. You're saying we can really take you, we can work with you a lot more, right? More integrated, longer timeline, right? Make a bigger impact across many different areas. Some of that might seem to some people like, well, there's more complexity. There's more to it. How have you found that in terms of your messaging or how you go to market, how are you able to concisely communicate that, or how do you know what to talk about? Because if you are providing or focusing or offering, let's say, services in multiple areas or multiple kind of different stages or events, how do you know what to talk about when you're reaching out to different people? Because it's not as simple as saying we do brand strategy. It's now we do A, B, C, D, E. How have you found that you're effective in accomplishing that?
It's interesting you bring that up because we were labeled a commercialization firm by a partner. So we've aligned ourselves with strategic partners that bring us business, and we showed them how we can help them with their clients, and they're like, "Yeah, you're a commercialization partner." And then we went back to the drawing board. We're like, "What does that mean?" And so with our messaging, we do ensure we say it's marketing and sales, portion of the commercialization. And so when we talk to potential clients, um, it is quite consultative. We want to know what their challenge is, but typically it's they're having a challenge either is typically they're having a challenge getting to that next level. So they're at a certain stage and now they're looking to grow by launching a new product or getting into a new market. So we take them from point A to point B, and we call that a commercialization path because we'll build in the strategy, and we'll implement that strategy, using our ability to market and sell. And so we not only implement the marketing and sales tactics, but we help build the operations behind it, the processes. We'll even do organizational design, and we'll scale those processes with the marketing and sales. I'm not sure if that made sense, but it's a more comprehensive offering, when we say go to market and then scaling.
Yeah. So have you had any pushback or any confusion from the people that you reach out to because you are doing a lot more? Like, does it connect with them right away when you say we are commercialization, experts? We help you to essentially scale and get to that next level with marketing and sales strategy, but plus other things. Does that connect with them, or I'm just wondering how have you kind of worked through that or refined it to get to the point where when you reach out to people or have conversations, they just instantly get what you do and you get their attention and interest?
Yeah, when we say commercialization, everyone seem to understand it, um, so far. But we do talk about building their marketing and sales capabilities for the long term, right? And so we've come across people that say my marketing's broken, or we need a CMO or we need a CRO. Okay, why do you need that? Right? And it's like, oh, we're trying to get to this next level. And so that's where we typically jump in, right? So we go in, we bring those capabilities, that competency, and we help them scale.
Yeah. And in that situation, would they still go ahead and bring in a CMO or a CRO, and for those chief revenue officer, in case you want to know what CRO is, right? Chief marketing officer for CMO. But would they still make those hires, or are you in some ways replacing them needing to hire those full-time roles?
So we would jump in as fractional CMOs or CROs. So we have jumped in, um, but the goal is to eventually get a fully functioning team within the organization. And so we come in a fraction of the cost, but we're able to provide, our executive and leadership experience and help them build a real marketing team or a real sales team. And then over time, we help them plan. And if it makes sense, then we would exit out and get in a real, a full-time CMO. If it doesn't make sense, then perhaps the team looks a little bit different for the long term.
Okay. So if I'm the CEO of a mid-sized company and I'm looking to get to the next level, and I say to you, Neel, yeah, I think just we really need a chief marketing officer, because we need someone who has that experience of getting us to that next level. We want someone full time, someone that can really be part of our culture. We need somebody full time. How do you respond to that? What have you found to be effective in showing them that, hey, there's another way? I know you said that you can be more cost efficient, right? Or less than, let's say they're going to hire a CMO and maybe that's $250,000 a year base plus a whole bunch of other stuff, give or take. How do you respond to that?
So I can give you a real example. So an ex-client of mine reached out to me, over a year ago. He actually texted me. He's like, my current marketing person is not working out. Please find me a CMO ASAP. And so I called him and I was like, why do you need a CMO? He's like, our marketing has never been working. The person's not working. I asked, how many people do you have in your department? He's like, well, there's the one person plus a junior. And I said, well, you can't have a CMO in that situation because a CMO is going to bring in probably five, six people and they're going to be a little bit less hands on. Would you be open for me jumping in as a fractional CMO and helping you build the right people and the right team and getting your marketing off the ground? And then we worked out, we did the math, and I jumped in. And since then, um, the CEO has been working very closely with with myself and the marketing department because he wants to see under the hood of how it's actually operating. And we've hired people, we put in new processes in place. We've got a few agencies, and we have matured it, and we're continuing to mature it. And at some point, I will end up exiting, and there will be a full time team there.
Okay. Got it. So you're still involved with them right now, or because you said an ex-client, so I wasn't sure if you're still working with them today or not.
He was an ex client at the time. Now he's a client again.
Got you. Okay. A client from back in the day now is got you. Okay. That makes sense. Um, there's people joining us that are likely thinking or have thought at one point or might think in the future about bringing on partners. And bringing on partners and kind of formalizing that kind of relationship. There's a lot of benefits to it. But there's also a lot of potential dangers or things to be careful of. And I'm wondering what you can kind of share in your experience of what do you think went really well? What do you think in hindsight maybe didn't go as well, or things you all really paid attention to in terms of partnership agreements, or just kind of walk us through any high level advice that you might offer to somebody around vetting and deciding when it makes sense or when it doesn't make sense to formalize kind of a partnership.
Yeah, it's like try before you buy. You don't want to get married before you date, right? So I would strongly suggest trying to run a few projects together, and it gets to the point where you do have chemistry and where it does work. But I think once you formalize it, you do need to be very clear about your roles. Who is talking to the client at what stage? Who should be working on the finances? Who should be doing some of the marketing? So it's hard to do that when it's a smaller firm because there's just so many things to do. But I think you have to be clear on whether or not you can work together and whether or not you're aligned. So one of the things we did, we looked at ourselves as a firm today, and we wanted to see what kind of firm we want to be tomorrow. And by tomorrow I mean 5, 10 years out. And so I modeled out several scenarios. Do we want to be a $5 million firm, a $50 million firm, $100 million firm, $1 billion firm? We got all the math there. If we charge on average $200-300 an hour, even if we don't do an hourly rate, but this is what we pay ourselves. What does that look like? What does our teams look like? What does our organization look like? And we got around the table and we discussed it. And we're kind of landing in that, small enough where we're nimble and somewhat boutique, but big enough where we got a lot of brand awareness and we're taking on serious projects. But that was a very good exercise on how we want to progress together. And I think you need to do that with a partner, because if you don't have the same vision, things are going to show up along the way where you're going to start disagreeing, and not in a good way, in a bad way, because you're going to start forking in the road. So I think it's important to have that conversation of where you want to end up.
And does everyone kind of have the same level of equity in the business, or is it different depending on when they came in or what their role is, or how do you guys kind of think about that from a compensation perspective or equity perspective?
Right now it's equal between the four of us. Yeah. I don't think we're thinking of adding more partners at this stage. We feel between the four of us, our competencies are broad enough and deep enough, and they complement each other enough where it works well.
And have you guys talked about, like, what if one partner is not pulling the line as much? They're not contributing as much, not creating as much value as the others. Is that a conversation that you've had in terms of how you would deal with a situation like that?
Yeah, you have to be direct. They're your partners, and you have to be clear with each other and what you expect from each other, and if someone's not pulling their weight, I have no problem being candid and direct. They need to know that this is how we're perceiving their efforts, or how I'm perceiving their efforts, or the damage it's causing, and I expect that in return that's why they're my partners, right? So I think it's very important. You have to be able to have those conversations. Um, and they should be fluff free. They should be direct, and no one should take it personally. If they joined you as a partner, it's because they have the same ambition as you do.
Let's come to present time. What is working best for you guys as a firm right now to generate high quality leads? For your pipeline. What are you seeing working best right now?
Yeah, so we're approaching it in three ways. One is partnerships. So we have been aligning ourselves with IR firms, PE firms, um, typically firms that are helping a company get capitalized, or they have a vested interest in having that business grow. So they become referral channels for us. The second thing is we are networking like crazy. We're going to every major event. We're traveling for events. We are we are making efforts to be on podcasts like this, speaking engagements. And then a third thing, which we need to put more effort into, is content. All of us on the team have the ability to write and design. It just we are we have a content calendar. We need to do a better job of that, but that has been the top focus for us. Going forward and developing more of that. Now I've tried things um, like cold outreach at mass, like on email, LinkedIn. It didn't work so well for me, and I'm not saying it doesn't work for a number of reasons. I think mostly because it felt very impersonal to me, and I I feel that when we actually have a conversation with somebody, we're able to communicate our value a lot better. And so the referral channels work, the networking channels work pretty well for us. At some point, we may want to scale and think about how to get, a hunter and SDR function. But at this point, those are the three that we're focused on.
What's been the hardest thing? And you mentioned the business now book, a couple of years old, 4 partners today. What's been the biggest challenge for you guys in terms of growing the business to this point?
Yeah, and it's interesting. The last couple of years with the pandemic and the way the market's gone, I've seen both. So when I jumped out of my executive position, my sales cycle was very slow, very short. Sorry, very short. And I would have a meeting, and I would follow up with a proposal, and it would probably be signed and ready to go in like 3 weeks. Fast forward to 2022 and last year, that 3 weeks to a month has expanded out to like 5, 6 months. So this B2B sales cycle has softened quite a bit. People are holding on to their budgets. A lot of the decision making had been dispersed across multiple people. We won a project last year by, I think it took 5 or 6 meetings. It took a few months. We literally designed wireframes for the product that they wanted beforehand. That's typically paid work afterwards. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was just to illustrate the value, and so that was probably one of our biggest challenges in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting how you guys have gone about this. When you think about kind of growth and reaching that next level, what do you feel is? I mean, I know you talk about content as one area to invest more time and energy in, but beyond content or beside content, what else do you feel is like the path or the area that you all are going to be focused on to get to that next level?
Yeah, I think with the content piece, it's really getting our really being able to communicate our value better than just a website with some messaging. So developing case studies that we can share and for outreach. Um, I think continuing on the path or making ourselves more visible. So we've talked a lot about sponsorships at events, um, sponsorships through media, and so reinvesting some of our revenues into those things. And again, it's more visibility, more awareness.
Not you. Well, Neel, I know there's a lot. You're still early in the journey here, 2 years in, but I mean, you guys have sounds like been doing some really great work. I want to make sure that people can learn more about you and about Tropoly to follow along with your journey. And I guess we'll look to maybe redo something like this. Fast forward another year or two and see where you guys are at. Where's the best place for people to learn more about you and about your company?
Sure. For our firm is Tropoly.io. So TROPOLY.io. And just me on LinkedIn, Neel Singh, NEELSINGH. Um, you know, you can always reach out to me out there.
We'll make sure to link that up in the show notes as well. Neel, thanks so much for coming on.